Hi, I'm Brian King, and this is Marriage Monday. Today, I want to talk to you about something that every couple faces. How do you rebuild trust after you've had a fight, after there's been conflict, after you've done something wrong and it needs to be fixed? Whether it's a small misunderstanding or a big blowout, trust can really take a hit. How do you get back to normal? How do you know when trust has been reestablished? Trust is when you can be fully yourself and feel at peace in the presence of your spouse. There's no fear of being criticized. You don't feel like you're being judged. Um, Nobody's thinking less of one another. You accept each other. Neither of you feels the need to walk on eggshells or guard your feelings or hide things. The tension's gone. The forgiveness has taken root. And even though you may remember your past problems, they no longer define your relationship. You're back in harmony. You're safe. You're accepted. You're connected again. That's what everyone wants after they've had a problem. How do you get there? Since I'm talking mostly to men, the question isn't, do I feel fine? The question is, how does she feel? Does she feel fine? Does she feel safe in my presence? Does she feel like she can be herself? Like she has the freedom to discuss the issue, to talk about problems, to not be afraid I'm gonna, erupt or explode or be angry with her? Does she feel safe? Trust can be broken in so many ways. Sometimes it's small things, sometimes it's really big things. It might start with a thoughtless comment or an unkept promise, a sarcastic remark, a harsh tone. It could even be something more damaging, something expressed with anger or um, name calling, lies. It could be things that lead to a cold war, or it could be a hot war. It could be like an all out, name calling, uh, screaming and yelling and whatever. It could be all the way up to that. It could be over anything from, a disagreement about what to have for dinner to one of the spouses having an affair. It could be anything in that whole range. Um, Obviously, in the more serious cases, rebuilding trust may not always be possible right away. And if it's something like an affair, it's going to depend on whether or not your spouse is willing to forgive you. So, very serious things we're dealing with here. The small things, obviously, you've got a much better chance at dealing with. The good news is, even with the big things, the process you have to follow to kind of get back into harmony and back into trust is the same. The steps to recovery are the same, whether it's a small issue or a big blow up. If your spouse is willing, trust can be rebuilt one choice at a time. So, step one, acknowledge the damage. When I got married, I would hurt my wife without trying by words or sarcasm or just being dumb, basically. I was used to dealing with guys mostly, and I wasn't careful with my words, and I would hurt her. Just because it wasn't intentional doesn't mean it didn't hurt her. So I had to acknowledge the damage. You can't fix what you won't face. If something's broken the trust, she doesn't feel safe, even if it's a small comment or sarcasm or a forgotten promise or a big mistake, you need to acknowledge it and say, I know I hurt you. I understand why that damaged your trust. You need to be humble. Don't offer excuses. Make sure she knows that you know that she's hurt. Step two, apologize well. Now, I didn't even know what an apology was for real until I got married, because I grew up with an older brother. I knew the forced apologies that we were asked to do. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry I got caught. That's about it. I'm sorry I didn't get the last shot in and you did. I'm sorry we got punished. But really being sorry, not so much. So you really need to kind of skip all of those apologies. Those aren't apologies. What you need to do uh, is own your actions. No excuses, no blame shifting. Well, I'm sorry I hurt you, but if you hadn't done that, I wouldn't have acted that way. That's blame shifting. Don't do that. A real apology says, I was wrong. I see how it affected you, and I want to make it right. That's what opens the door to reconciliation. And third, rebuild through consistency. You have to be consistent. If trust isn't rebuilt by promises, you can promise all you want, but if you don't deliver, then you're not going to rebuild trust. Trust is rebuilt by actions and patterns. Do what you say you'll do. Keep small commitments. Be reliable in daily things. If you have a temper and you're used to just using it as a tool, change that, because it's not a good tool. It doesn't work. It doesn't help. It doesn't fix anything. It just breaks things. It's like a hammer. It's a great demolition tool, but it's a horrible tool to try to build with. Use self-control. Make real changes. That's what real men do. They take charge and they make changes when they see that there's an issue. They don't back down from the issue. They face it head on and they change. You're going to have to change. If you have a temper, you're going to have to put it away. You're going to have to get rid of it. Save it for outside your home, because you certainly don't want to be demolishing the home you're trying to build. Your consistency of being keeping your promises, doing what you said you do, and it's that consistency. And it'll take time. If you've had an anger problem, she won't trust you right away, especially if you've used name calling and angry words. It's going to take time. But build it with consistency. In other words, when you get into those situations where you want to be angry and use, strong language and words, control yourself and don't do it. And eventually, slowly, you'll convince your spouse that she can relax and be normal again and not worry that you're going to resort to that again. And then the final step is to reconnect. You need to get the emotional connection back. Once the dust settles, don't just move on, reconnect. I like to get out of arguments. If I have an argument with my wife, my first thought is, how am I going to get away from this? But fix it first. And after you fix it, reconnect. Once you have settled down, you've acknowledged the damage, and you've apologized, and you're ready to be consistent, then reconnect emotionally. Talk to her. Touch her. Give her a hug. Tell her you're sorry again. Say you're sorry again. Reconnect. Look in her eyes. Ask her if she's okay. Tell her you want to make sure everything's fine. Spend time together. Share what you're feeling. Trust isn't only about words. It's about restoring that emotional safety. You can do it. Remember, trust doesn't grow back overnight. I mean, sure, the little things you can deal with, you know, on a daily basis. But if it's been a big problem, you can recover. It's just don't expect it to happen overnight. You know, it's kind of like planting seeds. You have to water it daily. You have to show that you've consistently changed. You have to continue to be honest. You have to continue to be humble. And with that, you can rebuild trust and come out stronger on the other side, even from something that's devastating if you've done something wrong. So there's hope. You know, start small and build. Acknowledge the damage, apologize for real, rebuild it through consistency, and then make sure you reconnect emotionally. Over time, any problem can be solved. That's it for today's Marriage Monday. Hope you're getting something out of this. Hope you're not having any of the big problems, and that you can just practice on little things and make your marriage even better. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening.